When you look at an architectural blueprint for a skyscraper, there is this, I don't know, this inherent comfort in the binary nature of it all.
Oh, absolutely. It's safe.
Right. The physics are just undisputed, like a load-bearing wall goes in a specific spot. The steel beams require this exact, precise thickness.
Yeah, it's math.
Exactly, it's math. If you pour the concrete according to the structural math, the building stands up, it's visible, it's clean, and it just makes sense.
But the moment you step away from
Yeah, the moment you pivot away from steel and glass and you attempt to build like a radically successful life or some enduring business from scratch, that comforting blueprint completely vanishes.
it's gone.
You are suddenly navigating this really murky landscape of, human ambition and psychological friction and all these unseen variables.
And that structural mystery of human potential is, honestly, it's arguably the hardest problem to solve. I mean, we spend decades learning the rigid laws of physics or mathematics in school.
Right, getting graded on it.
Exactly. Yet we are handed absolutely zero schematics for our own cognitive architecture.
None.
People just spend their entire lives trying to construct these metaphorical skyscrapers by, well, essentially just throwing bricks into the air and hoping they magically align into a foundation.
Which is such a great way to put it. And that is the exact problem we are dismantling today for you, the listener. We are pulling apart a highly concentrated, intensely analytical breakdown of what is essentially the most scrutinized success framework in modern history.
Yeah, and we should clarify what we're looking at today.
Yes. Unpack this. We have to start at ground zero, the very first piece of the foundation.
Right, because before any partnerships are formed, before any strategy is even drawn up on a whiteboard, you must possess a crystalline, undeniable understanding of what you actually want.
And that is where, 99% of people fail before they even take a single step?
Easily 99%.
Yeah.
I mean, they operate under this illusion that they have a clear goal, when in reality, they harbor a vague preference.
A vague preference, like what?
Like, they say they want financial freedom or they want to be healthy.
Right.
But those are abstract concepts. The brain cannot execute on an abstraction. It requires a specific coordinate.
Okay, the source material illustrates the power of this specific coordinate with an amazing story. The story of Edwin C. Barnes. And we really have to set the scene here because it sounds almost absurd by modern standards.
It really does.
So it is the turn of the 20th century. Barnes is a man with zero capital, like no money, zero formal education, and absolutely zero influential connections.
Just a completely average guy in terms of resources.
Less than average, probably. But he looks at a photograph of Thomas Edison and makes a definitive choice. He says, I am going to become Thomas Edison's business partner, not his employee.
Not an assistant.
Right. His equal partner.
And viewing that from the outside, the audacity of that borders on clinical delusion.
Totally.
I mean, you have a man at the absolute bottom of the socioeconomic ladder aiming for the absolute apex of American innovation at the time. Edison was, he was a giant.
He was like the Elon Musk or Steve Jobs of his era, and Barnes didn't even have the cash for a passenger train ticket to New Jersey to go see him.
So what does he do?
He jumps a freight train, he rides the rails, physically punishing himself, and eventually walks into Edison's laboratory, literally covered in soot, like dirt from the cargo train.
Incredible.
And he just states his intention to work with the great inventor. And Edison, being a rational businessman, obviously does not immediately hand over half of his massive empire to some transient who just hopped off a cargo train.
No. Edison's response was entirely predictable. But Barnes' reaction to it, that is where the psychological framework we're talking about begins to reveal itself.
Exactly, because Edison offered him a low-level, completely menial job.
Sweeping floors, basically.
Yeah, and Barnes accepted it. He didn't complain about being overqualified or, underappreciated.
Because he didn't view sweeping floors as a demotion from his goal. He viewed it as the initial entry point into the ecosystem he intended to conquer.
That is such a key reframe. So he waited for years in the background, showing up every single day, performing mundane tasks, and then Edison invents the Ediphone.
Right, the dictating machine.
Yeah, and Edison's own elite sales force universally rejected this thing as a total commercial failure. They hated it. But while everyone else saw a dud, Barnes saw his specific coordinate.
He saw the entry point.
He approached Edison, offered to sell the machine, and he completely dominated the market. I mean, he eventually earned the slogan, made by Edison and installed by Barnes.
Which is wild. He secured the exact partnership he had visualized years earlier.
So what's the underlying mechanism there?
The mechanism is the stark difference between a passive wish and a burning, definite desire. A wish evaporates the moment you hand someone a broom and tell them to sweep for 3 years.
Oh, 100%. Most people would quit on day 2.
Exactly. But a burning desire acts as this organizing principle for your entire nervous system. It creates a selective filter for reality, ensuring that you only perceive information, people, and opportunities that serve the ultimate objective.
Okay, so to help us, install that filter, the source provides a literal 6-step formula that Barnes inadvertently lived out. It's a mechanism to force the brain out of abstract dreaming and into concrete problem solving.
We should break these steps down carefully.
Let's do it. Step 1, decide exactly what you want. Like we said earlier, if the goal is financial, saying I want to be rich is a totally useless command.
Completely useless. You have to pick a specific number down to the dollar.
Down to the dollar. Why is that so important?
Because by attaching a numerical value, you engage the analytical hemisphere of the brain. Think about it like this. If you tell an architect to build you a nice house, they have nothing to draft.
Right. What does nice mean?
Exactly. But if you demand a 4,000 square foot single-story structure, they can immediately begin calculating material costs and structural loads. The specific number provides the parameter for the strategy.
I think of it like programming a GPS. You hop into the driver's seat, turn on the screen, and you don't just type somewhere sunny with a beach.
The computer has no idea what to do with that.
Exactly. You need the exact street address, the city, and the zip code. Because if you don't provide that, you're just going to waste a whole tank of gas driving in circles.
Which brings us to step 2, which provides the fuel for that journey. Decide the exact price you are willing to pay.
Yeah, the source is unflinching on this point. Every single ambition has a toll. You have to define the time, the specific skills, or the distinct value you will trade in return for the goal.
And this step is crucial because it serves as a pre-commitment mechanism. It actively dismantles entitlement.
How so?
Well, when you experience the inevitable friction, say you were working at 2 in the morning or a major client completely rejects your pitch, you don't collapse into a victim mentality.
You don't say, why is this happening to me?
Right. You process that friction as the predetermined cost you already agreed to pay. It basically converts suffering into a transaction.
Wow. Okay. Step 3 demands a strict deadline. Because a dream without a date is just a wish floating in the ether.
We can point directly to Parkinson's law here.
Remind us what that is?
Parkinson's law states that work will simply expand to fill the time allotted for its completion.
Oh, yeah. Like if you give yourself a decade to write a novel, it will take a decade of agonizing procrastination.
Exactly. A strict deadline introduces artificial urgency. It forces the brain to abandon perfectionism and prioritize relentless execution.
Okay, step 4 shifts us from theory to motion. It says, write a clear plan and start immediately, regardless of how messy or incomplete your preparation feels.
Just start?
Just start. Then step 5 consolidates the entire process. Write a single, concise statement. You fuse the exact goal, the required price, the rigid deadline, and the initial plan into one paragraph.
And that paragraph functions as the source code for the psychological reprogramming we need to discuss next. It has to be brief enough to memorize, yet comprehensive enough to hold the entire architecture of your ambition.
Which brings the formula to life in step 6. Read that statement aloud every morning when you wake up and every night before you sleep, vividly visualizing yourself already in possession of the goal.
Twice a day, minimum.
Before we move further into the mechanics of this, I actually want to pose a question directly to you, listening right now. What is your Barnes-level objective?
That's a great question to reflect on.
What is the outcome so undeniable that you would willingly take a freight train for it? Because if you are only armed with mild preferences, the behavioral tools we are about to explore will simply not activate.
They won't. The desire is the combustion engine. But, an engine is rendered entirely useless if the vehicle's chassis is compromised by crippling self-doubt.
Oh man, self-doubt is the killer.
It is. You can write a meticulously detailed statement for a $10 million valuation, but if your internal dialogue is constantly broadcasting feelings of inadequacy and imposter syndrome,
the behavioral output will always self-sabotage to match that internal belief.
Every single time.
So that transition from wanting the goal to actually rewiring your neural pathways to expect the goal, that is where the source dives into the mechanics of faith and autosuggestion. This is the antidote to the paralyzing hesitation beginners face.
Let's look at the historical example provided for faith.
Yeah, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in 1995.
It's a premier case study in deliberate identity construction, especially in the face of overwhelming empirical evidence to the contrary.
Let's examine that empirical evidence he was facing. In 1995, his lifelong singular obsession with becoming an NFL player was completely dead.
Done over.
He had just been unceremoniously cut from the Canadian Football League. He is sitting in a cramped apartment, staring at his wallet, which contains exactly $7.
Just $7.
By every objective metric, he has failed. He is at rock bottom. Yet the source notes that instead of succumbing to the reality of his bank account, he verbalized a completely different narrative. He told himself, I am destined for something bigger.
He was executing an override protocol right there.
An override protocol.
Yes. He refused to allow a temporary state of poverty to become a permanent trait of his identity.
So he forged a new identity, first navigating through these grim professional wrestling arenas where crowds literally chanted "Rocky sucks."
Which is brutal for your ego.
Brutal. And then enduring years of rejection in Hollywood. But he steadily forced the external world to match the internal picture he refused to let go of. The source is careful, by the way, to strip the mysticism away from the word faith.
Right, it's not magic.
No. It defines it simply as the ability to see your goal so vividly and consistently that your nervous system registers it as real long before it materializes physically.
And looking at this through the lens of cognitive behavioral science, the subconscious mind is remarkably uncritical.
What do you mean by uncritical?
I mean, it doesn't possess a firewall to separate objective truth from repeated fiction. It simply absorbs frequency.
Ah, frequency.
Yeah. If you repeatedly tell yourself that you are incapable, you actively prune neural pathways associated with risk-taking and opportunity recognition. You will subconsciously engineer your own failure just to maintain consistency with your internal narrative.
That is terrifying.
But conversely, if you flood the system with belief, the brain begins allocating glucose and attention to spot the resources necessary to validate that belief.
Okay, I have to challenge that premise, though. Let's look at the $7 reality. If I have $7 to my name, I am objectively mathematically broke.
You are.
If I sit in my car and repeat, I am destined for massive wealth and greatness, aren't I just participating in clinical delusion? Like, how is faking it till you make it a viable strategy and not just a massive coping mechanism for failure?
It's a fair pushback,
Hmm.
but the critical distinction lies between ignoring a problem and reframing your relationship to it.
Reframing it. Okay.
Faith, in this psychological context, is not the hallucination that your bank account is full when it is empty.
Okay.
It is acknowledging the empty bank account, but fiercely rejecting the notion that the empty bank account is your permanent ceiling. It is a mechanical process of overriding the brain's natural negativity bias.
So you aren't lying about the present.
No, you are enforcing a strict mandate on the future.
Enforcing a strict mandate. So it is a deliberate mechanical enforcement. And the source gives us the specific tool to execute that enforcement. Autosuggestion.
And to demonstrate the power of this tool, they look at Jim Carrey in the early 1990s.
Yes. Another completely compelling instance of an individual brute forcing an outcome through extreme subconscious programming.
Set the scene for Jim Carrey.
Okay, so before any of the fame, Jim Carrey was an impoverished comedian struggling to secure any meaningful screen time.
He was a nobody.
A complete nobody. And the natural human response would be to fixate on the lack of opportunity. But instead, he engaged in a profound act of autosuggestion. He wrote himself a physical check for $10 million.
A literal check.
Yeah, and in the memo line, he specified, for acting services rendered, and he post-dated it 5 years into the future. He carried that deteriorating, crinkled piece of paper in his wallet for years.
Pulling it out daily.
Daily, to visualize not just the money, but the actual physical sensation of earning that specific paycheck.
He was handing his subconscious a set of coordinates so vivid and emotionally charged that they could not be ignored or overwritten by daily anxieties.
And it worked. Almost 5 years to the day, he secured his breakout role in Dumb and Dumber. And guess what his compensation for that film was?
Precisely $10 million.
It gives you chills. The source defines autosuggestion as the relentless practice of feeding your own mind with calculative thoughts, images, and emotional states until the subconscious accepts them as undeniable facts and alters your behavior to manifest them.
And the mechanism works because, as we said, your subconscious mind will not argue with you.
It doesn't talk back.
No, it doesn't analyze the dirty apartment you live in and say, hey, this $10 million check is a statistical improbability. Stop looking at it. It solely operates on the input it receives.
So if the input is consistent,
If it's consistent and emotionally resonant, it begins to alter your micro-behaviors.
and micro behaviors, like what?
Like, you stand differently in an audition, you speak with a fraction more authority in a meeting, you maintain eye contact a little bit longer, and those micro-behaviors compound into macro results over time.
The source actually breaks this down into a highly practical daily protocol for us. It starts with setting two definitive triggers. You tether the recitation of your desire statement, the one from the 6 steps, to unshakable daily habits.
Things you already do automatically.
Exactly, like brushing your teeth in the morning and setting your alarm before bed. During those specific actions, you just pause for 20 seconds to read your statement out loud, forcefully injecting genuine emotion into the words.
In modern behavioral psychology, this is known as habit stacking.
Habit stacking.
Right. Attempting to build a brand new habit from scratch requires immense willpower, which, as we know, depletes rapidly throughout the day.
Decision fatigue.
Precisely.
Hmm.
But by anchoring the auto-suggestion to an existing automatic behavior like brushing your teeth, you hijack an already established neural pathway. It ensures the repetition occurs twice a day, with zero extra willpower required.
That's brilliant. And beyond the internal habits, there is an emphasis on environmental design in the source. Making the statement your phone's lock screen, or taping it to your bathroom mirror. But the most aggressive tactic they suggest is the if-then rule for negative, intrusive thoughts.
Oh, this is a highly necessary cognitive interrupt technique.
So when a negative thought breaches your mind, something like, I don't have the education for this, or this market is just way too saturated, you deploy a strict rule. You must immediately state your desire statement out loud as a hard reset.
You are actively overwriting the corrupted code with the target code in real time.
And to anchor this entire internal process in reality, you have to maintain a nightly proof log. Every evening, you document one sentence, today I did blank to move toward my goal.
The proof log is so important because it's the bridge between delusion and reality.
Right.
Autosuggestion without action is merely daydreaming. By forcing yourself to document a physical action every single night, you are providing the logical hemisphere of your brain with undeniable empirical evidence that you are progressing.
You are constructing an unshakable foundation of confidence built entirely on undeniable micro-wins.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have established the precise coordinate of desire. We have installed the belief software into the subconscious through autosuggestion. The internal engine is primed. But belief, isolated from action, is totally inert.
Nothing happens without action.
Which brings us to a major focus area for us today, bridging the gap between that internal vision and the external execution. And the relief here for anyone starting out is immense. You do not need to know everything to succeed. You only need to possess or have access to the right knowledge.
Yes, the fear of inadequate intelligence or insufficient education is the primary bottleneck that prevents beginners from deploying their plans. They assume they must become a master of every single discipline before they are allowed to even begin.
This source completely shatters that bottleneck using a phenomenal historical confrontation involving Henry Ford.
Such a great story.
In 1919, a prominent Chicago newspaper published a scathing editorial branding Henry Ford an ignorant idealist. They essentially argued that because he lacked a formal, broad education, he was entirely unfit to comment on complex societal or business matters.
And Ford did not take that well.
He was so incensed by this characterization that he sued the publication for libel.
A spectacularly aggressive legal maneuver that ultimately placed him directly on the witness stand, exposing him to hostile cross-examination.
Yeah, the opposing defense attorney saw this as a golden opportunity to publicly humiliate Ford. So he began firing off a barrage of basic, general knowledge questions. He asked him about historical dates, military facts, the names of obscure political figures.
The exact type of rote memorization you were tested on in grade school.
Right. And Ford tolerated this barrage for a moment, visibly irritated, before delivering just a legendary response. He leaned in and informed the lawyer, if I should really want to answer the foolish question you've just asked, let me remind you that I have a row of electric push buttons on my desk, and by pushing the right button, I can summon to my aid men who can answer any question I desire to ask concerning the business to which I am devoting most of my efforts.
It's just brilliant. He completely dismantled the traditional definition of intelligence right there on the stand.
He drew a hard line between possessing knowledge and knowing how to access and organize knowledge.
Exactly. Ford purposefully avoided cluttering his own mind with trivia. Instead, He relentlessly focused on building a network of people who possessed the exact specialized knowledge he lacked.
Brilliant engineers, supply chain managers, legal minds.
Right. He didn't need to know how to solve the specific equation. He just needed to know which button to push to summon the person who did.
Taking that a step further, it exposes a massive vulnerability in how we are traditionally educated, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. This school system heavily rewards the accumulation of general knowledge. But general knowledge is abundant and entirely commoditized.
You can just Google it.
Exactly. You can acquire it for free at a public library or through a search engine. But as the source fiercely argues, general knowledge, no matter how vast, is completely useless for generating significant wealth or driving massive impact unless it is organized and directed.
The analogy that really makes this click for me is the role of a general contractor building a custom home. If you want to construct a complex, modern house, you do not need to spend 4 years apprenticing to learn how to sweat copper plumbing pipes.
Oh, well, that would be a huge waste of time.
You don't need to go to trade school to understand the load calculations for the electrical breaker box.
Mhm.
If you halt construction to learn every single trade yourself, the house will literally never be finished.
Never.
The general contractor's true skill is knowing exactly what the finished house must look like, understanding the sequence of construction, and knowing the phone numbers of the absolute best plumber and electrician in the city.
The contractor orchestrates the specialized knowledge. And specialized knowledge is surgical. It is a highly specific skill set deployed to achieve a highly definite outcome. And it only generates power when it is structured into a practical plan of action.
We see this exact dynamic with Steve Jobs. The source highlights that Jobs was not some transcendent computer engineer.
No, he wasn't writing the code.
He was not the one sitting in the garage soldering the motherboards for the original operating systems. But Jobs possessed a flawless, uncompromising vision for intuitive, beautifully designed consumer technology.
And he partnered with Steve Wozniak, who housed the profound technical expertise required to actually build the machines.
Jobs was the ultimate general contractor of the personal computer revolution.
He identified the necessary specialized knowledge and provided the framework for that knowledge to be monetized and distributed globally.
So the source outlines a very pragmatic method for anyone listening to leverage specialized knowledge immediately. First, ruthlessly define the target. Second, audit the goal and identify the 3 to 5 critical skills required to achieve it.
And third, and this is the real pivot point, make a deliberate, strategic decision for each skill. Will I acquire the skill myself, or will I borrow it from someone else?
That singular decision matrix saves years of misdirected energy.
It forces an audit of your own cognitive bandwidth. If you are launching a startup, is spending 3 weeks learning a complex video editing software the highest and best use of your energy?
Probably not.
No. Should you borrow that specialized knowledge by hiring a freelancer, freeing you up to focus entirely on product development and capital acquisition? Yes.
Now, to ensure this isn't just some intellectual exercise, the source mandates running a 30-day mini project.
You have to act on it.
You take the knowledge you've organized, whether it resides in your own brain or the brains of your team, and you force it to produce a tangible, visible result within 1 month. Because hoarding knowledge without application is just a vanity metric.
It's just trivia otherwise.
So we have the desire, the belief, and the specialized knowledge sitting there like raw timber on a job site. Next, we have to explore how the faculty of imagination shapes that timber and how organized planning actually swings the hammer.
Imagination is frequently misunderstood, I think, as a purely artistic trait, like painting or writing poetry. But in this framework, imagination is the literal workshop of the mind. It is the designated space where the raw data of specialized knowledge is hammered into a functional, executable strategy.
Let's dissect the origin story of Airbnb as our example here.
Yeah.
The year is 2007. 2 roommates living in San Francisco are facing a severe cash flow problem. They literally cannot make their rent.
A very common problem.
Very common. Simultaneously, a massive industrial design conference is rolling into the city, and every single hotel room is booked solid. So they retreat into the workshop of their imagination.
And what do?
They pull 3 air mattresses out of a closet, inflate them on their living room floor, offer a Pop-Tart breakfast, and build a highly simple website to rent the space to desperate conference attendees. They dubbed it Airbed and Breakfast.
And that is a flawless demonstration of what the source categorizes as synthetic imagination.
Synthetic imagination, meaning they didn't invent anything fundamentally new.
Yeah, exactly. The concept of paying for a bed has existed for millennia. Providing breakfast is ancient. The internet was already fully functional. They merely utilized synthetic imagination to take existing, disconnected concepts, short-term lodging, air mattresses, and an online payment portal, and smash them together into a novel, highly lucrative combination.
It's so simple when you look at it that way.
Because synthetic imagination is the workhorse of modern business. It does not require a stroke of unprecedented lightning bolt genius. It simply requires a highly observant mind willing to rearrange old ideas, old plans, or old technologies into new structures. The vast majority of immense fortunes are built on the back of synthetic imagination.
Now, the source does contrast this with creative imagination, which operates differently. The example provided there is the invention of Velcro.
Georges de Mistral.
Yes. In the 1940s, Georges de Mistral, the Swiss electrical engineer, is walking his dog through the woods. Upon returning, he is incredibly annoyed by the dozens of small burrs fiercely clinging to his dog's fur and to his own pants.
And the average person just picks them off, complains, and throws them away.
Exactly. But de Mistral puts the burr under a microscope. He observes the thousands of tiny, rigid hooks that catch onto loops of fabric or fur. That flash of curiosity led him to invent a two-sided fastening system that completely revolutionized multiple industries.
Creative imagination is closer to pure inspiration. It is the mind's ability to observe a natural phenomenon or a profound problem and generate an entirely unprecedented concept to solve it. But it is crucial to understand that whether you rely on synthetic rearrangement or creative inspiration, the immediate byproduct is simply an idea.
And an idea, lacking a rigid architecture, is totally worthless.
Worthless, which introduces the absolute necessity of organized planning.
To look at organized planning, the evolution of Netflix is used to demonstrate how planning must be both structured and deeply adaptable. Netflix did not begin as the streaming behemoth we know today.
Not at all.
They started with a logistical plan to mail physical DVDs to consumers. It was a solid plan that disrupted Blockbuster, but it was bound by the physical limitations of the Postal Service.
Right, you had to wait days for a movie.
Then they observed the horizon, saw the expansion of internet bandwidth, and initiated a massive pivot to digital streaming. At the very beginning, the execution was super rough. The streaming quality was low, the library was sparse, and consumers were hesitant to abandon their physical discs.
But the initial turbulence didn't matter because they possessed a long-term architectural plan. They were building the infrastructure for a future they knew was inevitable.
And they continually refined that architecture. As the streaming space became crowded with competitors, they looked at their plan, realized they were overly dependent on licensing other people's content, and pivoted massively into funding and producing their own original shows.
None of those massive industry shifts were accidental. Every single phase was the result of organized planning, adjusting to real-world data. Planning is the crucible where the abstract desire is forced to interact with the unforgiving nature of reality.
And the framework provided by the source for constructing this plan is incredibly pragmatic for the listener to use. It demands that you strip away the complexity. First, you must define a single governing metric.
Just one number.
You pick one number that unequivocally proves you are advancing toward the goal. Is it monthly recurring revenue? Is it daily active users? Is it the number of cold calls made per week? You isolate that one metric. Then you fracture your massive ambition into 3 to 5 sequential steps, each anchored by a strict deadline.
But the point of failure for most plans occurs in the very next step, which you must translate those broad sequential steps into granular weekly actions. What exact task must be completed by Friday at 5:02 p.m.? Who is physically responsible for executing it? If a task is not assigned a name and a time block on a calendar, it is not a plan, it is a hallucination.
A hallucination. That's harsh but true. You have to map the required resources ruthlessly. What software do you need? Whose specialized knowledge do you need to borrow this week? I actually want to dig into a specific example the source uses here because it feels counterintuitive to most people's idea of planning.
A YouTube example.
Yeah, they mention a content creator, a YouTuber, who forced themselves to overcome perfectionism by committing to a plan of publishing one highly imperfect video every single week, regardless of the quality. Looking at that, it suggests that the initial plan doesn't actually need to be strategically sound or high quality. It just needs to exist so you have something to fix.
The underlying mechanism there is that action generates data, and data allows for correction. A deeply flawed plan that is executed aggressively will always outperform a flawless plan that remains entirely theoretical in a notebook.
Defeat is just feedback. That's the phrase the source uses.
It's a brilliant phrase. Your initial plan is almost statistically guaranteed to be incorrect in several major ways. When you inevitably hit a wall and experience a defeat, the untrained mind views that as a signal to abandon the overall desire.
Right, this isn't meant to be.
Exactly. But the trained mind views that defeat purely as analytical feedback, indicating that the specific tactic requires revision. You must possess the emotional regulation to absorb the punch and adjust the plan.
Which perfectly initiates our next major exploration. We are transitioning into what the source describes as the push, because a meticulously organized plan is nothing more than a piece of paper if you are paralyzed by hesitation. We are entering the crucible of execution, decision, and persistence.
This is where things get really intense.
Let's return to the industrial era and look at Henry Ford again. The year is 1914. He holds a press conference that effectively detonates a bomb in the business world. At the time, the standard wage for a factory worker was around $2.50 for a grueling 9-hour day.
Barely enough to survive.
Ford publicly announces that he is immediately doubling the wage to $5 a day and reducing the shift to 8 hours.
The blowback from the establishment was ferocious and instantaneous. Financial columnists labeled his decision economic suicide. Rival industrialists were apoplectic, convinced Ford's mandate would completely capsize the manufacturing economy by setting impossible wage expectations.
But Ford was totally immovable. He analyzed the data, made the decision rapidly, and completely refused to entertain the criticism.
And look at the downstream effects of that single decision. Factory productivity surged because workers were rested and fiercely loyal. The staggering turnover rate, which had been bleeding the company dry, evaporated practically overnight.
And the most subversive, brilliant outcome. By paying his workforce double, he created a new middle class that could suddenly afford to purchase the very Model T cars rolling off his assembly line.
It was an unparalleled masterstroke of macroeconomic design.
Hmm.
But the strategy is actually secondary to the psychological trait that allowed it to happen, the velocity and permanence of the decision.
The source identifies this as a universal behavioral signature among the hyper-successful. They gather the necessary data, make a firm decision with extreme speed, and they alter that decision incredibly slowly, if they alter it at all.
Contrast that with the behavior of the average individual. They languish in analysis paralysis for months. When they finally manage to make a tentative decision, the moment they encounter a negative comment from a peer or face a minor logistical hurdle, they instantly reverse course.
Hesitation allows doubt to infiltrate the plan, bleeding away all forward momentum. But making a rapid decision is only the initial spark, right? The true test is maintaining that decision when the environment turns hostile.
Which introduces the concept of persistence.
Highlighted by one of the most agonizing stories in the entire source material. We look at the mid-19th century during the chaos of the Colorado Gold Rush. A man named R.U. Darby and his uncle catch gold fever.
A very common affliction at the time.
They head west, stake a claim, and actually strike a rich vein of gold ore. Euphoric, they quietly cover up the mine, travel back east to their hometown, raise significant capital from friends and family, purchase heavy, expensive drilling machinery, and ship it all back to Colorado to pull their fortune out of the earth.
And up to that exact moment, they had perfectly executed the framework we've been talking about. They possessed a burning desire, they secured specialized knowledge in the form of machinery, and they executed an organized plan.
They fire up the drills, dig down, and suddenly, the vein of gold just vanishes. It's a geological anomaly. They're digging through worthless dirt. They keep drilling for weeks, burning through their capital, desperately hoping to hit the vein again.
The pressure must have been immense.
Finally, the psychological weight of the failure crushes them. They decide to quit. They sell tens of thousands of dollars worth of heavy machinery to a local junk dealer for absolute pennies, and they take the train back home in total humiliation.
But the tragedy of the story is entirely dependent on what the junk dealer chose to do next.
What did he do?
He did not merely resume digging blindly where Darby left off. He recognized a gap in his own specialized knowledge and hired a mining engineer to conduct a geological survey of the fault lines.
The engineer examines the dirt, runs the calculations, and discovers that the vein of gold hadn't actually disappeared. It had simply shifted due to a fault line. His calculations proved that Darby and his uncle had stopped their drills exactly 3 feet from the richest concentration of gold in the entire region.
3 feet.
3 feet. The junk dealer adjusted the angle of the drill, hit the massive vein, and extracted millions of dollars from the ground. Darby spent the rest of his life haunted by the fact that he quit 3 feet from his ultimate goal.
It is the ultimate cautionary tale regarding the fragility of human willpower. The temptation to quit is always most intense right before a massive breakthrough, because the friction is highest. Persistence is not merely a physical act of continuing to work, it is an impenetrable state of mind. It is a biological refusal to accept temporary defeat as a permanent conclusion.
But let's pause and interrogate this for a second, because there is a massive, incredibly dangerous tension here.
Okay, what is it?
Look at Henry Ford sticking to the $5 wage, and then look at Darby stubbornly drilling into empty dirt before finally quitting. How does an entrepreneur actually know the difference in real time? How do you know if you are 3 feet from a massive vein of gold, or if you are just blindingly burning cash digging a massive hole in a completely barren mountain? Because at a certain point, a bad plan is just a bad plan, and persisting at it is foolish.
That is the defining paradox of all ambitious endeavors. And the source resolves this tension with a brilliant, immutable rule. Fix the plan, not the goal.
Fix the plan, not the goal.
Yes. If your ultimate desire is to build a dominant media company, and your current strategy is a daily podcast that has gained zero traction after 12 months of relentless execution, you do not abandon the desire for the media company.
You don't just say, I guess I'm not meant for media.
No. You ruthlessly dissect the podcast. You change the format. You change the marketing distribution. You upgrade the audio quality. You iterate the tactics while maintaining an unyielding grip on the final destination. Darby's failure wasn't just that he stopped digging. It was that he stopped seeking new specialized knowledge when his initial tactic failed.
Okay, that makes sense. To build that kind of unyielding grip, the source breaks down the 8 drivers of persistence. It requires a clearly defined purpose, a white-hot desire, self-reliance built on accurate knowledge, definite plans, cooperation from others, willpower, and the establishment of automatic habits.
All interlocking pieces.
But I want to zero in on cooperation from others for a moment, because pushing through a barren mine of dirt on sheer isolated willpower is a recipe for catastrophic burnout.
Isolation is the absolute breeding ground for rationalized quitting. When you are alone with your failures, your brain will skillfully convince you that giving up is the most logical and safe option available.
Which drops us directly into one of the most critical focus areas of this entire deep dive: the mechanics of building profoundly effective partnerships. To scale your ambition and insulate your persistence, you have to multiply your cognitive and emotional strength through the minds of others. Napoleon Hill turned this concept the mastermind principle.
And it remains arguably the most potent mechanical lever in the entire philosophical framework.
The historical proof of this principle is staggering. Let's look at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina in 1903. Orville and Wilbur Wright are attempting to solve the problem of powered, sustained human flight, a concept the entire global scientific and academic establishment had declared mathematically impossible.
They were laughing at them.
Oh, completely. The Wright brothers were not backed by university endowments. They did not have advanced engineering degrees. They were bicycle mechanics from Ohio. Every single time they tested a glider, they risked catastrophic physical injury. Every time a prototype smashed into the sand, it destroyed capital they could barely afford to lose. The national press openly ridiculed them as crackpots.
The combined psychological pressure of severe financial strain, imminent physical danger, and relentless public humiliation would fracture the willpower of almost any individual acting alone.
But they were entirely insulated by their partnership. The historical accounts show that when Orville was consumed by doubt and ready to abandon the project, Wilbur provided the emotional stability and optimism.
And vice versa.
Right. When Wilbur was stuck on a complex aerodynamic problem regarding the wing warping, Orville's distinct perspective unlocked the solution. Their synergy wasn't just supportive, it was generative. It produced the first controlled, sustained flight in human history, forever altering the trajectory of the species.
The source defines a mastermind as the coordination of knowledge and effort in a spirit of perfect harmony between 2 or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. When 2 minds engage with that level of synchronized intensity, they don't just combine, they synthesize what Hill famously called a third invisible force.
I conceptualize it using a battery circuit analogy. If you take a single AA battery, it contains a finite specific voltage. It can power a small flashlight. But if you wire 4 of those AA batteries together in a series circuit, the voltage compounds, you can suddenly power a complex piece of machinery.
That's exactly how a mastermind works.
A functional mastermind operates exactly like a human electrical circuit. It instantly grants you access to decades of specialized knowledge you haven't personally earned. More importantly, it provides a shock absorber for your persistence when the inevitable disasters occur.
Furthermore, it introduces the mechanism of severe accountability. Left to our own devices, humans will continually push deadlines and excuse poor execution.
I'll just do it tomorrow.
Exactly.
Hmm.
However, when you are contractually obligated to look three highly competent partners in the eye every single week and report on your lack of progress, the social friction forces your execution rate to skyrocket.
But this is where theory crashes into reality. Anyone who has ever joined a networking group or a casual business meetup knows the trap here. How do you prevent this powerful battery circuit from devolving into a completely useless social club?
Oh, the social club trap.
You know exactly what I mean.
Hmm.
Four people meet at a coffee shop, complain about the economy for 20 minutes, hype up a bunch of grandiose ideas, and leave without a single task being accomplished.
The degradation of a mastermind into a social club is the most common point of failure, and it happens precisely because the group lacks rigid structural discipline.
Well, the source provides a highly aggressive, unforgiving blueprint for how to construct and operate a mastermind that actually drives results. Let's walk through the exact parameters.
Rule 1.
Rule 1. Limit the group to 2 to 4 complementary individuals. If you invite 8 people, you don't have a mastermind, you have an audience. You must select people whose specialized knowledge directly compensates for your own blind spots.
And Rule 2. You must lead with value. You do not approach high-level operators and beg for mentorship. You present your blueprint, clearly state the distinct value you bring to their operations, and propose an alliance of mutual benefit.
Rule 3 regulates the time limit, and it is totally non-negotiable. Meet weekly for exactly 45 minutes. Do not stretch it to an hour.
Why 45 instead of 60?
Because if you give a group 60 minutes, human nature dictates that the first 15 minutes will be consumed by trivial small talk. 45 minutes creates a sense of artificial scarcity. It forces the participants to immediately dive into clinical problem solving.
Brilliant. Rule 4. Maintain absolute harmony by attacking the problem, never the person. Egos must be entirely checked at the door.
But Rule 5 is the absolute game changer. It is the bias to action. The source states that every single piece of advice, every strategy discussed, must culminate in a concrete next step. It requires a designated who and a strict when.
If the timer hits 45 minutes and the meeting adjourns without highly specific trackable deliverables assigned to individual members with strict weekly deadlines, the entire session was a catastrophic failure. It was merely a conversation, not a mastermind protocol.
Finally, Rule 6. Run the mastermind in strict 90-day cycles. You treat it like a corporate fiscal quarter. At the end of 3 months, you ruthlessly audit the outcomes. Have the businesses grown? Has the execution velocity increased?
And if they haven't?
If someone is consistently failing to deliver or the energy has become toxic, you dissolve the partnership or rotate members without emotion. It is a tactical alliance, not a social obligation.
So if we step back and look at the architecture we've built so far, we have the precise coordinates of desire, the specialized knowledge, the organized plan, and the high-voltage circuit of the mastermind.
The external machinery is fully assembled.
But the source now shifts focus entirely. It pivots from the external framework to the internal biological fuel required to run this machinery at maximum capacity. We are venturing into the highly nuanced concepts of advanced energy channeling and subconscious mastery.
This section of the deep dive is where the concepts sound almost radical, but when you map them to the behavior of elite performers, it clicks perfectly into place. The source introduces a concept Napoleon Hill called sex transmutation,
which is essentially the practice of channeling your most intense biological energy.
Let's anchor this abstract idea with the visceral reality of Muhammad Ali in 1974, the rumble in the jungle in Zaire. Ali is facing George Foreman for the heavyweight championship of the world. Foreman is significantly younger, he possesses terrifying knockout power, and he is the overwhelming favorite to destroy Ali.
Ali is fully aware that if he walks into the center of the ring and attempts to match Foreman's raw physical power punch for punch, he will be unconscious in 3 rounds.
So Ali required an advantage that could not be quantified by muscle mass or reach advantage. He needed to access a different reservoir of power. So what does he do? Ali enters a period of severe monastic discipline. He removes every single external distraction from his training camp. He isolates himself from the media circus. And crucially, he practices intense physical and emotional celibacy.
He takes the profound, raw biological drive that naturally exists within him, and instead of allowing it to dissipate through normal physical expression, he acts like a dam holding back a river.
He channels every ounce of that pressurized energy directly into his focus, his speed, and his psychological warfare. He enters the ring radiating an almost terrifying charisma, utilizes his brilliant rope-a-dope strategy to systematically exhaust the raging foreman, and dramatically knocks him out in the eighth round.
The boxing strategy was brilliant, but the underlying engine powering that strategy was transmuted energy, and the source addresses this concept of sex transmutation without any puritanical judgment. It defines it purely as a mechanism of energy redirection.
Right, because humans possess highly charged emotional states, sexual drive, deep-seated anger, profound grief. These states flood the body with cortisol, adrenaline, and dopamine.
And the average person acts impulsively on these chemicals, dissipating the energy entirely. Transmutation is the disciplined practice of recognizing that intense chemical surge, restraining the immediate physical impulse, and aggressively redirecting that high-octane biological fuel into creative problem-solving, artistic output, or relentless execution of the plan.
It is the ultimate test of executive function. The source argues that this specific type of unvented energy is one of the most potent forces in human nature. When you successfully channel it, it acts as a massive amplifier for your imagination. It enhances your physical endurance and dramatically heightens your personal charisma.
Which, as we just discussed, is entirely necessary for convincing high-level operators to join your mastermind.
Exactly. But if you lack the discipline to channel it, the energy scatters your focus and sabotages your momentum.
It is the biological conversion of raw emotion into kinetic business energy. And when that high-octane energy is fed directly into the subconscious mind, it produces extraordinary results.
Which perfectly bridges us to the next profound example of internal programming. We have to examine Michael Phelps leading up to the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing.
A flawless clinical demonstration of the subconscious mind acting as the intermediary between a burning desire and physical reality.
Phelps didn't just engage in mild positive thinking. His coach, Bob Bowman, had him run mental videotapes every single day. Phelps would lie in bed and engage in hyper-realistic, emotionally charged visualization. He didn't just picture the crowd cheering. He forced his nervous system to feel the exact temperature of the water, to smell the chlorine, to feel the precise resistance of the water against his hands on every single stroke.
But here is the critical deviation from normal sports psychology. He systematically visualized catastrophe.
Yes, he vividly imagined what his exact physical response would be if his swimsuit ripped on the starting block or if his goggles suddenly failed.
He was utilizing his imagination as a simulator to stress test his autonomic nervous system in a completely controlled environment.
And during the final of the 200-meter butterfly, the absolute worst-case scenario materialized. He dives in, and almost immediately his goggles crack and fill completely with water.
He is swimming an Olympic final completely blind.
Grind. The natural biological response to losing your vision in a high-stress, physically exhausting environment is sheer panic. Heart rate spikes, form collapses. But Phelps didn't panic because his subconscious had already lived and solved this exact crisis 100 times. His body simply executed the pre-programmed contingency plan.
He stayed perfectly calm.
He utilized his stored specialized knowledge to count the exact number of strokes required to reach the wall, and not only won the gold medal, but broke a world record without being able to see.
He had successfully installed a subconscious fire drill. The source describes the subconscious as the access point to what Hill termed infinite intelligence. While that phrase sounds mystical in modern neurological terms, it refers to the brain's astonishing capacity to process millions of data points below the threshold of conscious awareness.
The subconscious is perpetually recording the environment, right?
Yes, but it is a reactive engine. It responds primarily to dominant emotional frequencies. If you saturate your subconscious with anxiety and visions of failure, it will utilize its massive processing power to identify every possible obstacle paralyzing your actions.
But if you saturate it with vivid, emotionally intense visualizations of your precise coordinate, it begins to filter reality to identify the specific pathways to get you there.
To explain this filtering process, the source uses the metaphor of a radio transmitter and receiver. Your brain is constantly broadcasting a frequency dictated by your dominant habitual thoughts.
In cognitive neuroscience, we refer to this filtering mechanism as the reticular activating system. It is the network in the brainstem that dictates selective attention.
It is the exact reason why The moment you decide you want to purchase a specific model of a black SUV, you suddenly see that identical black SUV at every intersection.
Right, the vehicles did not magically appear, they were always there. Your brain was simply filtering them out as irrelevant visual noise to conserve processing power.
When you intensely program your subconscious with a burning desire, you recalibrate the reticular activating system. Suddenly, your brain stops filtering out the obscure news article, the passing comment in a meeting, or the specific individual that possesses the specialized knowledge you need. You tune the biological radio dial to the exact frequency of your ambition.
And when you place 2 or 3 individuals who are broadcasting that exact same intense frequency into a mastermind group, the signal strength becomes exponential. Think about Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak in that California garage. They were both aggressively broadcast of the identical frequency. We are going to democratize computing power. That shared resonance became so undeniably powerful that it bent the entire technology industry to its will.
However, every single piece of architecture we have discussed, the exact desire, the autosuggestion, the specialized knowledge, the organized plan, the mastermind circuit, and the subconscious programming, all of it lead to one final, unavoidable confrontation.
The entire system is inherently fragile if it is not vigorously defended against its ultimate natural predator.
Yes, every strategy we've outlined marches directly toward the final boss of this framework. We're talking about Chapter 13 in the source material. The sixth sense and the ultimate devastating enemy of the beginner, the six ghosts of fear.
You can assemble the most brilliant mastermind in the world, and you can draft a flawless operational plan. But if you do not actively identify and conquer these underlying fears, the entire structure will violently collapse under pressure.
The sixth sense, in Hill's terminology, is not a supernatural ability. It is the culmination of mastering the prior 12 principles. It is the state of flow and pure intuition that occurs when the subconscious is perfectly aligned with the conscious plan.
It is Steve Jobs famously advising a graduating class to, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become.
It's that visceral gut pull toward a specific risk where the immediate spreadsheet math might look terrible, but your deeply programmed subconscious knows it is the correct strategic move.
But you cannot access that level of elite intuition if the ghosts are actively haunting the system. The source explicitly names these enemies. There are 6 fundamental fears that cripple beginners.
Let's list them.
The fear of poverty, the fear of criticism, the fear of ill health, the fear of loss of love, the fear of old age, and the fear of death.
What makes these specific fears so insidious is their method of operation. The source profoundly notes that these ghosts rarely attack you directly. They do not shout. They whisper.
They are incredibly deceptive. The fear of criticism is never going to bluntly tell you, don't launch this podcast because you are terrified your high school friends will make fun of you. Your ego wouldn't accept that cowardice.
Instead, the fear disguises itself as extreme prudence. It whispers, "This audio equipment isn't professional enough yet. You need to spend another 6 months researching market trends before you record. Let's just hold off until conditions are perfect."
It cloaks itself in logic to push you back into the safety of inaction. It convinces you to lower your exact coordinates so you never have to experience the pain of falling short publicly.
Analyzing this through a broader lens, this subtle paralysis is precisely why millions of highly intelligent, incredibly talented individuals never actualize their potential. Their failure is rarely a result of intellectual deficit or a lack of access to capital. It is almost always the result of a slow, corrosive fear.
The fear of poverty forces a brilliant entrepreneur to cling to a mediocre corporate salary because the biweekly paycheck provides the illusion of safety.
The fear of loss of love prevents a writer from locking the door and demanding the isolated hours necessary to finish the manuscript, terrified their partner might resent their ambition.
I want you to examine your own internal dialogue right now. Which of those 6 ghosts is currently whispering to you? When you look at your organized plan, are you legitimately waiting for Q3 because the market data demands it? Or are you secretly paralyzed by the fear of poverty if the launch fails? Because the source drops an uncompromising truth bomb for anyone trying to build something new. Fear is a sophisticated liar.
If you study the lives of the individuals we've discussed, Barnes riding the freight train, Ford doubling his payroll, Ali facing Foreman, they did not execute their plans because they had miraculously eradicated fear from their nervous systems.
They didn't wait for the ghost to disappear.
No, they felt the visceral terror. They recognized it as a biological impulse designed to keep them safe but stagnant, and they aggressively executed the plan anyway.
They burned the ships. They decided upon the exact coordinate, and they started executing exactly where they stood, armed only with the imperfect tools they possessed at that moment.
Ultimately, the profound message embedded in this entire framework transcends the mere accumulation of financial wealth. It is a systematic blueprint for seizing absolute agency over the trajectory of your own existence.
It is a daily, mechanical refusal to allow inherited fears, temporary setbacks, or a lack of formal general knowledge to dictate the parameters of what you are allowed to achieve.
We have napped an incredible amount of psychological terrain today.
We really have. We took that binary architectural blueprint of the mind and illuminated every hidden structural load. We began at ground zero with the absolute necessity of a burning, specific desire. Remember Barnes, covered in soot, refusing to be an employee.
We dissected the six-step formula to assign an exact coordinate to your ambition and pre-commit to the painful price it will demand.
We examine the cognitive mechanics of shattering beginner self-doubt through the deliberate habit stacking of autosuggestion, writing your own post-dated check to force your subconscious to accept a new reality.
We explored the immense relief of leveraging specialized knowledge understanding that you never have to be the plumber if you master the role of the general contractor.
We detailed how to shape that specialized knowledge through synthetic imagination and force it into reality through organized planning, anchoring ourselves to the concept that defeat is purely feedback.
We analyzed the sheer economic force of rapid decisions and unyielding persistence, ensuring we possess the flexibility to fix the plan without ever abandoning the ultimate goal, so we never quit 3 feet from gold.
We constructed the rigid 45-minute rules of engagement required to build a functional mastermind that multiplies our output rather than draining our time.
We'd entered into the profound biological advantages of transmuting our rawest energies and utilizing our reticular activating system to pre-program our nervous system for inevitable success.
And finally, we confronted the sophisticated lies whispered by the 6 ghosts of fear. The singular, undeniable takeaway from all of this deep psychological engineering is this: lasting success is not a byproduct of genetic luck or serendipitous timing. It is the direct result of the relentless, systematic application of these specific cognitive principles.
But before we conclude this session, I want to present a final concept for you to interrogate. Returning to the metaphor of the brain as a powerful radio transmitter.
Let's hear it.
If it is a biological fact that your brain is constantly broadcasting a frequency dictated by your most dominant emotionally charged thoughts, what exact signal are you unknowingly transmitting into the world at this very second? And perhaps a more terrifying, illuminating question. Audit the people and the recurring situations currently present in your life right now. Who or what is tuning into that exact signal?
That is a staggering realization to sit with, because if you change the internal frequency, you inevitably alter the external reality. It is time to stop waiting for a perfect, risk-free blueprint to be handed to you and start engineering it yourself. Take that first, deeply uncomfortable step today, even if the plan is completely messy. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us, and we'll see you on the next one.